I'm Dan Grunfeld. In this episode of Judicate West, Result Beyond Dispute, I chat with Jonathan Anschell, the general counsel who helped launch a movie that became a global sensation while he continued to work tirelessly to assist the most vulnerable members of our society. This is A Profile in Excellence. Hello, everyone. Today on Judicate West, Results Beyond Dispute, Profiles in Excellence, I'm truly honored to welcome one of the most well-regarded and distinguished general counsel of our times, Jonathan Anschell of Mattel. Jonathan is Executive VP, Chief Legal Officer, and Secretary of Mattel. He joined Mattel in 2021. In his role, Jonathan oversees all legal responsibilities for Mattel's operations and transactions, as well as corporate governance, securities, intellectual property, litigation, and privacy. He's also responsible for compliance and government affairs, something that I'm going to be talking to him about. Before he joined Mattel, Jonathan served as Executive Vice President and General Counsel for Viacom's CBS Media Networks, leading the legal affairs teams for all CBS entertainment and news operations, as well as the business and legal affairs teams for Viacom's CBS cable networks in the U.S., but also internationally. Before that, he was a litigator and then a law firm partner at some of the country's leading law firms. He's a past chair of the board of an organization called Public Counsel, which sounds vaguely familiar. Maybe you can remind me what that is. And a current member of the board of the Alliance for Children's Rights. He also teaches entertainment law as an adjunct professor at UCLA Law School. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be here.
Jonathan, how did we get here? You were born a Canadian. Weren't you supposed to be a hockey star with Stanley Cups being waved around the rink, carried by you?
Well, I think anybody who has ever seen me on skates would know that a career in hockey was not in my future. I was very lucky to be coming out of law school at a time when the cross-border traffic between the U.S. and Canada was really beginning to increase in the legal profession. Since then, there certainly have been more of my fellow expatriate Canadians ending up here in the U.S., but I was lucky that the first firm I joined in L.A. had picked up over the years before me a handful of expat Canadians, and they were willing to welcome another one and not to make too much fun of my accent and to give me a chance.
Yeah, I think I'm not in a position to make fun of anybody's accent. So for the next hour or so, you're pretty safe, at least on that count. And by the way, I was going to be the next point guard for the Lakers after Magic Johnson, and you see how that worked out. So yeah, we're kindred spirits in that sense. So when did you first consider becoming a lawyer? When did it enter your thought process?
Well, for me, and I suspect the same is true of a lot of our colleagues, it was a pretty early ambition. I remember watching the Paper Chase with John Houseman on TV as a kid, and I always really enjoyed any of the legal dramas. When I was in high school, LA Law was a big hit. And so for me, from the time I had any real coherent ambition, wanting to become a lawyer was always front and center. I have an older sister who's 8 years older than me who also is a lawyer, and it was fun seeing her go through law school and seeing what she was doing. So really from almost as far back as I can remember, having an ambition, being a lawyer was pretty much it.
So once again, I too had a crush on Susan Day. Colleen, my wife, knows about it. We're good, but again, we're walking the same path. You now have a very, very big job. What is the biggest misconception about being a general counsel in a large public company?
It's an interesting question. I think one misconception probably is that the role of a general counsel is really sort of a hands-off role. I know when I was a litigator, I think to some extent there was a perception that when you go in-house, you can kind of put your feet up a little bit, that maybe it's a somewhat easier gig than being a lawyer in private practice. It's different. Having said that, it's sort of a different kind of pressure than you get in private practice, sort of a different sort of stress, but one that I think, and I'm trying to think about how it would compare to private practice. one thing that I think may or may not be a misconception is that as a general counsel, your job sometimes feels a mile wide and an inch deep. So I think that probably is a widely held perception, but if it is, that's one that's accurate. What I really love about the role is getting to do a number of different things and getting to touch a number of different practice areas and getting to help troubleshoot with colleagues who are much more knowledgeable about their practice areas than I could ever hope to be. And, I think in answer to your question, really, I'm not sure it's so much a misconception, but largely the role of a general counsel is troubleshooting and serving as a resource and a sounding board for a variety of different colleagues. And that's what makes the job challenging and also what makes it fun.
I was going to get to this a little later, but since you opened the door, at a company of your size, you must see some pretty esoteric legal issues. I mean, you have a department of over 300 people. There must be areas of the law that you every once in a while cross your desk, and they never told you about that in general counsel school. Not that there is general counsel school. So how do you deal with that? Well, how do you deal with tackling something that, as able and as smart as you are, is just you haven't had to deal with, either individually or as an institution?
I think one of the first challenges to some extent, because as lawyers, we're all trained to have a mastery of the details and to get into the weeds. And sometimes we don't have the ability to do that time-wise. And I think one of the challenges of coming into a role like this is learning to delegate and learning to trust and learning to assume, as I said, that people you're working with are going to know their jobs much better than you ever could. And so what that tasks the general counsel with is trying to really distill the issues into really what the practical implications for the business are and what the right thing to do is. And so hopefully, as a general counsel, the value that somebody can bring is that critical distance a little bit, because I'm incredibly lucky that the members of my department are the ones with the mastery of the detail and have an enormous amount of knowledge and expertise in their practice areas. Hopefully, on my best day, what I can bring to the table is to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, at the end of the day, what are the practical implications for the business of the issue that we're wrestling with? How do we solve for that? And how do we do it in a way that's consistent with Mattel's values? And sometimes I think having a sounding board not as familiar with the detail is hopefully helpful to the lawyers who have the mastery of the detail, because it helps them, I think, to kind of elevate a little bit and figure out, okay, when all the details are mastered, where does that put us from a business standpoint, and what do we want the answer to be?
When you first got elevated to very senior positions in the legal departments, were you micromanaging more? Is this something that you taught yourself to micromanage less over time and trust your colleagues to make sure the balls don't drop?
Yes, in a word. And I think and the short answer is I had to learn that quickly, because I think in any big role, in any organization where there are lots of different subject matters coming at you and lots of different colleagues with an enormous amount of knowledge of those, you have to learn pretty quickly not to micromanage. And I think as I said, I think it's an instinct that a lot of us have as lawyers, and I think it's reinforced at a variety of different points in our careers. And when you transition to a senior in-house role, learning to delegate and learning to simplify and synthesize and distill is the real challenge, because I think that's the value that we can bring to the table, to trust the subject matter experts for their subject matter expertise, and to add to the equation, hopefully that element of synthesis and translating the legal knowledge into a practical action plan.
On a different note, both at CBS and at Mattel, you must get solicited either officially or unofficially for business every day of the year. One can only imagine what it's like. So over the years, what works in a successful pitch to get business and what doesn't?
It's a good question. I think a law school class probably could be taught on that.
Yeah. We'll have you back if we need to. Yeah.
I think fundamentally one of the things that it's important for lawyers looking to develop business to remember is that the lawyer-client relationship at its most basic level is a human relationship. And as trite as it might sound, I think clients, including large corporations like ours, hire lawyers, not law firms. And so I think the basics of building rapport and building trust are as important in the business development process for lawyers as in any other context. And coupling that then also with the addition of value and subject matter expertise. People shouldn't be afraid to show what they know and to raise their hands and say, listen, I understand you guys are navigating some tricky issues. Maybe we can help. Here are some things that we've done for other clients. So there's no reason to be shy. But at the same time, I think to the extent that sometimes the process goes astray is when lawyers are pitching practices or colleagues that potential clients have never met. And so I think a more effective way to do it, if you happen to have a colleague who might be able to help a client out, would be to make the introduction on a personal level. To say, listen, my partner Bob is going to be in LA in a couple of weeks. Can we come in and have lunch and tell you a little bit about what we do and build that relationship so that when trouble starts in Bob, in an area where Bob might be able to help, it's easy to pick up the phone because that's somebody that we've already met, have a rapport with, have a level of trust with. In my mind, it really all comes back down to the human relationship and human connection and trust.
So without naming names, again, you don't know defamation law as well as anybody I know. Please share the absolutely worst business pitch that you've ever had to endure. And again, don't name names, but sometimes things are so bad they become memorable.
So one of the things I think there's a logical temptation to do, I'll tell you two stories. One is there is a tendency, I think, on the part, especially if a company gets hit with a high-profile lawsuit. I can't tell you how many times I've been forwarded a copy of the complaint. Pretty much anybody can assume that I have the complaint already. I don't need 20 more copies in my inbox reminding me just what has happened. So, rather than pull the complaint and say, you've just been hit with this high profile lawsuit. You might not know about it. I think you can pretty much assume the client knows about it. And rather than clutter up their inbox with another copy of the complaint, maybe just say, listen, saw the news about this new lawsuit. We'd love to help. We've done something similar, little snapshot of what the expertise is. Please let us know if you need a copy of the complaint. So that's one. And, the other is, again, just sort of a pitch without any context to it. For me, it's always very helpful if somebody's reaching out to showcase what they've done. So if you assume that a company gets sued for copyright infringement in a particular, with a particular fact pattern, if a lawyer pitching that business has handled a similar case, let us know. Because, again, we want to work with people who have the right skills and have the right knowledge and have a running start at the issues that we're grappling with. And being willing to showcase that and share some thoughts is a lot more effective than just emailing a copy of the complaint.
I think it is very hard to overstate the magnitude of the Barbie's movie cultural and cinematic impact and success. I mean, it is really a societal touchstone. There's a whole generation of kids and teenagers where that is probably going to be one of the first defining movies of their lives. It goes
hopefully.
over. Yes. There's been a lot about how the movie changed the trajectory of Mattel, but I'm actually interested more about how did the movie change your life as general counsel?
It certainly was a lot of fun to work on, and its pendency at the very early stages was one of the catalysts for my making the move from Viacom CBS, as it was known at the time, over to Mattel. Because getting the chance to be a part of the company's transformation and pivot from what was traditionally known as a toy manufacturing company into an IP-based company that can reach fans and audiences a number of different ways was what made the opportunity really, really exciting. And getting a chance to be a part of the deal making and the other elements of the legal process around the Barbie movie really, really was rewarding in that respect. Seeing something that we were navigating at its early stages, trying to solve for a number of different issues that come up in the making of any movie, but particularly a movie based on a pre-existing franchise of IP that had never been exploited in this way before. And getting to see that come to fruition really is a rewarding experience for anybody who practices in the areas that we do, thinking about new and different ways to deliver experiences to audiences based on IP that hasn't been exploited in that way before. So for me, it really was a lot of fun. And I think, as importantly for my department at Mattel and for the company more broadly, it's changed the way that we're perceived, because this was really proof of concept that you can take a toy franchise like Barbie and turn it into not just a movie, but hopefully, as you pointed out, a real pop culture moment. And we've got other movies in the pipeline, a couple coming out this summer, shameless plug. We have Masters of the Universe coming out.
Plug away.
And also Matchbox, two very different movies. But one of the things we're excited about is showing that we have different types of IP that will resonate with different audiences and can make for fun and interesting viewing in different ways. That as much as Barbie is something we're really, really proud of and always will be, we have lots of other great IP as well. And it's fun to get to collaborate with different filmmakers and different studios in different ways to reach different audiences.
There's an old saying that goes something like, yesterday's ceiling becomes today's floors. So in a sense, is there, fair or not, just a level of expectation and anticipation based on what Barbie did for the company and what the projections are moving forward?
It's a very good question, and something that I think we need to keep in mind, because not every movie is going to be as big a hit as Barbie. We were obviously very, very happy with how well the movie was received, how great a movie it was, what the commercial performance was. And as you know, to have all those stars align in the movie business is a rare thing. And so I think one of the things we need to do is to manage our own expectations, to manage the industry's expectations, to manage Wall Street's expectations, so that they don't assume every Mattel film's release is going to be as big as Barbie. But part of the point is they don't need to be. You do not have to have $1 billion opening weekend for a movie to be very successful. And there are many different pathways to success in the film business. Not every movie is going to have as big a budget as Barbie. We can do smaller movies too, some of which may even go straight to streaming, but still from the standpoint both of the quality of the movie and how it performs commercially based on its budget, still be a success. So one of the things we want to show is that we can make the big blockbuster movie, but we can make smaller movies as well. We can make different movies. And there are a number of different ways to succeed in that without all of them having to be the blockbuster that Barbie was. Obviously, we've got a lot of excitement around these upcoming movies. We want them to be really, really big hits. But we also know that there are many different ways to succeed in the making and distribution of a movie as well.
So if you only, in quotes, make $900 million, not the end of the world.
I think we'll live with that. We will happily live with that. Exactly.
And move on to the next one. Yeah.
Exactly.
When you and I were coming up, conventional wisdom at the time, both in law school and in business school, was that if you wanted to become a CEO, being general counsel was probably, of all the C-suite jobs, the least desirable. That was ultimately a goal. And the reason for that was because general counsels were considered, Dr. No's, right? They were the ones that stopped things. They're the ones that said no instead of yes. They were perceived as overly cautious and risk averse. So it's 2026. You are an acclaimed general counsel. How do you navigate the struggle between, on the one hand, making sure that the company is legally safe, and on the other hand, making sure that you are individually and as a head of your department promoting adventurous, far-reaching, innovative work?
I mean, that's the challenge that I think we face every day, is figuring out that balance. And the way that I put it in our department is that our goal every day should be to get to a smart yes. And by smart, meaning, you're helping the business execute on the vision, whether that's commercial or creative, in a way that's within the guardrails. So that the goal should be, if a business person comes to the law department with an idea, not to say no, but to be able to say, yes, if. So, we can do what it is that you want to do if we can pivot in certain ways. So if you can make a little adjustment here, a little course correction there, we think there's a way to get to a yes with this. And the earlier that we're brought into that process, the better. And that is a trust building process with the internal clients. Because to your point, I think, rightly or wrongly, for many, many years, corporate law departments were perceived as a roadblock. And there are really two steps to this. Step number one is building the trust with the internal clients that that's not the case. But I wouldn't even say step number two. The other step number one is within the department orienting the lens in the right way, to be not to be a roadblock, but to keep the end of the automotive analogy up, more of a set of guardrails, so that we're helping the business achieve creative objectives and achieve business objectives in a way that is smart and responsible and not taking an undue amount of risk. There may be certain businesses and certain initiatives where you can have a little more risk tolerance, where, you need to realize, okay, when you're exploiting, for example, an old franchise in new and different ways, and using IP in ways that may not be expressly envisioned under an old contract. Sometimes you're not operating in a risk-free environment, and you need to get comfortable with that. There are other situations, particularly in our business on the toy manufacturing side, when it comes to product safety, where the risk tolerance has to be zero or close to it, because we're putting toys in the hands of children and parents. Right. And that's an important relationship of trust. But in new and different businesses, particularly new types of exploitation of IP, sometimes there's a recognition that you're not going to be 100% bulletproof. But if you're reasonably confident that what you're doing is within the spirit of a relationship, sometimes you need to move forward and to not let the perfect become the enemy of the good.
And following up on that, as you were coming up as a lawyer and then as a business executive, was your default the cautious lawyer, or was your default the entrepreneurial go-get-em? In other words, what did you have to teach yourself more?
It's interesting. I think I have always had probably a little bit of a cowboy instinct in me. I don't know if that's from growing up on the Canadian prairies, but like you, I started my career as a litigator, where a lot of decisions have to be made in real time. There is sort of, that drama to it, and that, real-time interaction where if you're in trial or if you're in a deposition and things are happening in real time, you don't have the luxury of hitting pause and doing a bunch of research or turning around another red line. And I think that in a lot of ways is good training for the kinds of issues that come at you in an in-house situation. Because oftentimes you have business people who need an answer right away. And, particularly I remember when I worked at CBS, getting calls from, the set of a live show that was about to tape in a few minutes, or from a reporter in the field on the news side. And you don't have the luxury to say, listen, let me put together a memo and we'll get back to you in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of what we do, the real-time risk assessments and problem solving. And, hopefully with the benefit of years of doing it, hopefully that, leads a person to have instincts that are helpful in the moment.
I've always thought that it's easier to learn caution than it is to learn how to be aggressive and reactive and willing to take a risk at the moment. Your thoughts?
I think you're right. And I think one of the, I wouldn't say challenges, but one of the sort of areas of development that I've had sometimes over the years with lawyers in-house who are moving up is trying to get them comfortable again, without letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. Getting comfortable with the concept of good enough to move forward. Again, that's something that I think, in law school and in the early years of practice, sometimes we're trained against. And I think sometimes, particularly people who are trained as transactional lawyers sometimes are, have this sort of, attention to detail kind of drilled into them. And teaching people to get comfortable with the fact that sometimes we're not going to be operating in a zero risk environment. And sometimes you're not going to get in a deal every comma exactly the way you want it. But nonetheless, there's a business imperative to move forward. And if we can do that responsibly, again, getting to a smart yes, it doesn't mean it's a flawless yes or a bulletproof yes. It means it's the best yes we can get to under the circumstances.
And sometimes good enough is just good.
It's good enough. Yep.
Right. You have over 300 people in your legal department across many jurisdictions. How do you go about establishing a culture or in a sense of esprit de corps?
It's another good question. I think one of the advantages we have in a company like Mattel, and I was lucky to have it at CBS and then at Viacom CBS, is that what we do has as its end product something that's supposed to be fun and compelling. When the end product is fun, it makes it relatively easy, hopefully, to build fun into our department and to get people excited about the goal and the end result of what it is that we're doing. So I've found over the years that taking the opportunity to infuse some excitement around that and to bring the fun of the toy business or the fun of the television business or the movie business into the department is a way to do that, whether it's taking people out to a special screening of the Barbie movie or getting people a sneak preview of something that we're doing or having clients who are doing really cool things with AI come into our department town halls and show off a little bit. And then just to hopefully have a sense of humor and just make people realize that, look, we're lucky to be doing what we're doing. We are very, very lucky to be, using our legal skills to, help advance a business that has as its end goal something that should be fun. And I've been very, very lucky that way over the years. And it should be fun, and one of the things like we have the ability to do in a department like ours, and I think the same goes for a lot of other departments, is really sort of infuse that spirit into the day-to-day. So, and in our best days, I think we get that right and people have a pretty good time.
You would not have left CBS to become a general counsel for a widget company. Doesn't sound like, right?
No. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. Because I think to get to practice law sort of at the intersection of, law and business and popular culture is really an amazing opportunity. And getting to use our legal skills to help really brilliant, creative people, realize their creative visions and get across something that's going to entertain audiences or make kids happy by playing with a toy, that is a major blessing.
Ever since we've known each other, going decades at this point, you have been a big proponent of pro bono, whether at CBS or at Mattel or when you were a partner and practicing with younger associates. Why?
I think, look, there are a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's the right thing to do. I talked just a moment ago about the amazing opportunities we have and the privileges that we have, but I think infused throughout our profession over centuries has been a recognition that comes with a set of responsibilities. that, with the skills that we've been given and with the opportunities that we've been given and the amazing experiences that we've been given comes an opportunity to give back. So that's kind of the virtue message of it all. The other aspect of it, I know for me, and I know in the firms and companies where I've worked, feels good. I think people really get a lot out of being able to use their skills to give back to the community in ways that are both, short-term and long-term. I mean, oftentimes so much of what we do can feel like it's in the abstract or like it's, it's moving the needle of a business, but we really don't get to see the real world impact of that. But to give people an opportunity, particularly people working in an in-house law department, to step out of that and, to handle an adoption out of the foster care system or to handle the advocacy on behalf of a special needs child to get education resources, or even just to spend a day building a habitat house. That is obviously beneficial to the recipients of that work, but it's also enormously beneficial to the people who have the opportunity to do the work. And so it's been wonderful to see what that has done. Just for the, getting back to what you were asking about before, for the morale and esprit de corps of our department at Mattel. So I joined in the throes of the pandemic. So, nobody was able to do much except, do Zoom calls and watch Netflix for a number of years. And both during that time, when we figured out ways to get involved in things that we could do on a pro bono basis remotely, but then, more dramatically, as the pandemic receded and we came back to the office, getting people back to hands-on pro bono work not only hopefully benefited the community, but I saw firsthand the benefits of our department and the cohesiveness and the morale that generated for us.
And did that ethos come from your childhood, growing up in Canada? Is that something that was sort of part of the fabric of the family?
I think the answer to that is certainly yes. I was very, very lucky to grow up in a home where that was important. And my stepfather in particular was very, very active in community affairs and gave very generously of his time and of his resources for a number of different community organizations. And so it was something I got to hear about around the dinner table and to see growing up, and got a chance happily to, carry forward in the things that I've been able to do. But yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm sure I've mentioned to you over the years, I grew up in a relatively small community where there was sort of an immediacy to the needs. And by the same token, kind of an immediacy to the fulfillment of those needs, so that it was not abstract or anonymous. It was clear if there was a need, unless adequate money was raised, the hockey rink wasn't going to open, getting back to your hockey comment earlier, or the summer camp wasn't going to open. Unless people really rolled up their sleeves and got involved, things weren't going to happen. And seeing that immediate connection definitely had a big impact on me.
Are you saying that if more money would have been raised for the hockey rink, you may, in fact, have made it to the NHL? Is that what I hear you saying?
I would say that there are some problems that all the money in the world would not solve, and my hockey skills are certainly one of them.
Even at Mattel,
especially even if we make many more movies as successful as Barbie, they're not going to get me back out on the ice.
Not solvable. On a related but different note, when I introduced you, I mentioned the fact that you have for many years taught at UCLA as an adjunct professor, and you have a well-deserved reputation as mentoring and working with young lawyers. It's 2026. What are your observations about the legal landscape faced by young lawyers?
I would say my heart goes out to them, because I think the generation of lawyers coming through now have had to face some unique challenges, really, in some respects, specific to this moment. Number one is the pandemic, and lawyers who were, in law school or coming out of law school and entering the workforce in this weird, either remote or hybrid era. I was so lucky as a brand new lawyer and a young associate to have the ability, when I was stymied, which occurred on a regular basis, to just stick my head in the door of an associate a few years ahead of me to say, have you ever done one of these projects before? Do you have any idea what this partner's comment in the margins of my brief means? Those sorts of things, right? I mean, and getting that informal mentorship and also just the camaraderie sometimes that you build, late at night around a conference table across a pizza box, I don't think really can be replicated over Zoom. So I'm happy to see that our profession has come back in person, and hopefully junior lawyers are getting the kind of mentorship, both formal and informal, that I was really lucky to get. And I think, one of the things I encourage my students to do is to show up in person and seek out those opportunities and have coffee with people and really, soak up everything that you can get, because that's so valuable. And I think what our profession does on its best days in terms of the tradition of training and mentorship. The other thing that I think is daunting, but I'm not, perhaps quite as maybe worried about as others are, obviously, is the advent of AI. And, whether that will eliminate legal jobs, whether it will change the landscape and so on. And I happen to think, and admittedly I'm a terminal optimist on many things, but I think that what we're seeing is the emergence certainly of a new set of tools. No different than when the electronic research tools first emerged and we could stop shepherdizing cases on paper. And I think certainly there'll be a period of flux and uncertainty while we figure out how these new tools figure into the legal landscape. But, hopefully if we're lucky, it'll just mean, less drudgery and more opportunities for higher order thinking. And so, I think navigating that undoubtedly is a challenge for law students and junior lawyers coming through now. And then there's also, I think sometimes there's this pressure, to feel like the only path to success is through, so-called big law, which is, a term that didn't even exist when we started practicing. I mean, there were big firms, but big law now has this sort of brand to it. And I try to assure students and younger lawyers I meet that there are many, many different paths to interesting and rewarding work. And big law is not the only one. That's not to knock big law. I think big law firms do a very good job training and giving back in terms of pro bono, and there's a lot to be said for that. But it's not the only path to a really wonderful legal career.
You talked a little about the joy and the benefit of going out to a lunch or a drink as all of us were coming up. And I'm a firm believer that CEOs talk to CEOs and mediators talk to fellow mediators and doctors talk to doctors. So, Jonathan, when general counsels get behind closed doors and have a drink or two, what do they talk about? You can tell us.
Well, listen, after the commiseration about the number of complaints that we get sent, every time.
I get 27 new complaints I already have, yeah.
Every time we get sued. I think there's a healthy comparing of notes, and there's a recognition that, the work that our outside lawyers do is hard work. And, we ask a lot of the lawyers we hire. And certainly there's a lot of comparison around that. What experiences people have had, who works well in what areas, which mediators are the most effective in getting cases settled and bringing an understanding of the commercial realities to the table. But I would say by and large, it's, there's less shade getting thrown around than you might envision. I think there is a healthy recognition. I'm not sure if I'm happy or disappointed by that answer. Listen, I've been lucky over the years to get to know my counterparts at a number of different companies, and it's always fun to compare notes. Everybody has a slightly different take on how they do it, and I always come away from those lunches and dinners with some good ideas. I'm always, listen, I'm proud of the way that we do things here, but there's always room for improvement. So it's fun to hear how other people tackle similar problems and, who who their favorite litigators are and who their favorite mediators are and what AI tools they're most excited about.
I will continue to urge you to put on the table in those dinners what mediators get results. Just saying.
Well, I happen to know one. I happen to know one who brings a great
bigger
deal.
Than me? Yeah.
He looks quite a bit like you.
A different topic, which I alluded to when I introduced you. As part of your general counsel responsibilities at Mattel, you are responsible for government affairs for Mattel. For Mattel, or for that matter of fact, any similarly situated company, what is it like in these incredibly partisan times to have to navigate government affairs?
I mean, it's certainly challenging, and anybody who opens up the newspaper on a given day knows that we're obviously in a fluid time and an environment that's definitely got some challenges to it. I think the goal really for any government affairs department, but certainly for ours, and this applies, not only here in the United States, but of course around the world as well, because we do business all over the world, is to really get across the message that we want to do the right thing, and that we're not interested in a free pass. We're not trying to negotiate for special treatment. We're committed to doing the right thing wherever we do business, and we're committed to delivering a product that is safe and beneficial, and entertaining for children, and safe and reassuring for parents on the toy side, and on the entertainment side, we're committed to delivering compelling entertainment with a positive message and getting people familiar with that. I think the goal of our government affairs team really across the world is to build those relationships and bring people in and let them see what we do and get them acquainted with Mattel, with all of our lines of business and with the way that we approach it. And we think that goes a long way, so that if there's a question about something or a concern about something, it starts with the premise that this is a responsible company, one that is committed to doing right by consumers. And when you start with that premise, there's usually a conversation to be had that can show that maybe something that looks like a problem really isn't.
For those who may be interested someday, and let's assume either young lawyers or mid-level lawyers, in potentially joining an in-house legal department, either yours or any other large department. Ours is fun. I
encourage people to come give us a chance.
You hear that, audience members? Any words of wisdom? Do you specialize? Do you not specialize? What's the best path, not only to get a job, but to actually do well once you're in?
I would say first that there are a number of paths. So again, getting back to what we were talking about before with some of the pressures now that law students feel in the choice of their first jobs. There are a number of different paths, so I wouldn't want anybody to feel like there's only one way in, or for that matter, only one stage of someone's career when they can make a move in-house. I waited relatively long. I practiced as a litigator for a dozen years before I moved in-house. So some people think, do I need to move at 2 years, at 5 years? Is there any sort of magic number? And I think the answer to that is no. I think the challenge and the goal should be to find a business that you're interested in. Don't go in-house just to go in-house. We spend a lot of our days working, so find something that interests you, not just on a legal level, but also find an industry or a business that you're interested in and that you'd like to learn more about. And then once you get there, take advantage of the opportunity to learn about the business and enjoy that, and to be part of the fabric of the business. Because I think that is something that an in-house experience can offer that's harder to get in a law firm. And I found, as much as I loved my litigation practice and loved my clients, what was sometimes a little hard for me is, you'd spend time in the trenches with a client, litigating a case or doing a trial, sometimes over a period of weeks or months. And then even if you got a fantastic result, there might be a wonderful celebratory dinner, and then you were done. Right? I mean, then the matter was over. The client would say, great, thanks. We'll call you the next time we have one of these. And they would go off and continue with their business. And I wanted to say, well, wait, I want to, I want to stay part of the gang. And the nice thing is in an in-house setting is that you're always part of the gang. You're part of the fabric of the business, and you get to be, in the room and at the table from really the inception of projects and concepts and ideas all the way through their execution and through the full, life cycle of the business, and really getting a chance to be, part of the fabric of the place and not just an outside resource that is only brought in for a specific case or a specific deal. So I would encourage anybody who does make the move in-house to take advantage of that, because that is, again, something that I think is unique to the in-house setting and really, really rewarding, because you get to think, not just as a lawyer, strictly speaking, but on your best days, you're an advisor on strategy, on business, on optics, on values, on a whole host of things that are informed by your legal training, but not limited to your legal training.
Based on that answer, Jonathan, I expect that the next time you all have an opening, you're going to get hundreds of my audience members applying for a position with your company.
I'm counting on it. Come join us.
There we go. We're sadly almost out of time, but before I let you go, and this has been so enjoyable, one of the things that we explicitly and implicitly alluded to in our conversation today was that these are changing times. And in some ways, they're troubled times. So, Jonathan, are you looking forward, generally optimistic, generally pessimistic? It depends who was the last person you spoke to. What, not only as a general counsel and chief legal officer of Mattel, but just as a lawyer, as a leader, as a business person, what do you see in the future, and what's your mood like?
As I said a couple of minutes ago, I'm a terminal optimist, so I have to, issue that disclaimer. But I think as a society and as a profession, we have lived through some challenging times before. And, if you're a student of history, there are many, many examples. One that comes to mind was a fascinating panel discussion I got to go to a number of years ago. I guess it would have been around 2018, because it was the 50th anniversary of 1968. And it was a panel discussion put on by the Media Law Resource Center that featured a number of now senior journalists, but people who were junior journalists in 1968, covering those turbulent times. And, if you think about the parallels to where we are today, it was a polarized political environment. There was a war. There had been, acts of domestic violence, including political assassinations, both, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy. A number of things that really tore at the fabric of society. And yet we got through it. And, I know that sometimes it's, these are challenging times, but we'll get through this. And as I said, I'm an optimist when it comes to these things. And I think, there are so many examples of times that may have been challenging at the time, but yet somehow we've been lucky then, as we are now, to live in a society and a system that has shown its resilience. And, I have every hope and expectation that we're going to continue to do the same.
On that optimistic and hopeful note, thank you. Jonathan, the name of the show is Profiles in Excellence. And to so many people in the legal and business community, you exemplify that. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to Mattel and your personal next steps. Good luck with the things coming out, the movies coming out that you mentioned. And to my audience member, thank you again for joining. We will see you next time.
Thanks very much, Dan. This was fun.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to Results Beyond Dispute from Judicate West. Views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the organizations with whom they are affiliated or of Judicate West. Until next time,